Welcome back! Today, and for the remainder of this week, I will be making a Princess Aurora peasant look, but it's not going to be accurate to the animation. It's going to be a hybrid between the animated version of the dress and the limited edition designer princess doll version. Primarily because I have a beautiful fabric that will be perfect for the skirt of the designer doll version rather than the animated version. So that's like my core reasoning. Plus, I do actually just really love that design, so I'm going to do a more modest version of that design because it's quite, extravagant for a peasant look. I mean, you could always argue the point that Aurora was raised by fairies and the fairies could have just magicked her clothes into existence. Getting sidetracked now. I'm going to start with the bodice, which I have a beautiful black velvet for. I got it off eBay because someone was like clearing out their parents' loft and they just found all these fabrics. And then once I've completed the bodice, we're moving on to the skirt because that'll be nice and quick. And then the blouse, which will be long. My stupid, overly ambitious, with no skills to back it up brain has decided that I want to have a go at smocking. So in case you don't know what smocking is, this is smocking. And you can do lots of cool things with it. And I found some very cool shapes that I think I want to create my blouse for the neckline and for the cuts. So we will see how that goes. Full disclosure, I'm actually on day 2. I completely forgot to film an intro yesterday. So before we do anything else, I am going to hand you over to past Sophie working on the bodice.
24 hours earlier.
I already have a bodice pattern made up, so I use that to cut out panels from the black velvet and the lining material as well. It was at this point that I realised I was supposed to actually modify the panels to fit Aurora's style of bodice, like so. It's not supposed to have straps or shoulders on it. So I went back in afterwards and fixed my mistake. I wanted the bodice to have a bit of structure to it, so I created some boning channels to place between each of the panels. As you can see, these are very basic strips of cotton folded over with a zigzag stitch to seal them together, and the idea is that the boning can just slide into these. I then made 2 strips of the velvet to go either side of the centre front panel. These are going to have eyelets sewn into them to hold the decorative lace-up feature on the front. I could then move on to assembling the bodice, starting with the centre front panel and working my way out. I had to make sure I pinned the layers in the right order so that the boning channels would be on the inside and the decorative eyelet strips would be on the outside. I then had to very carefully put this through the machine, as at this point I am sewing through 6 layers of fabric. After that, it was a simple case of repeating the steps for the rest of the panels, which definitely got easier as the rest were only 4 layers. Here you can see the assembled result. You can see the 2 strips on the front where the eyelets are going to go for the lace-up feature. And unlike my last bodice with one division, I didn't sew it to itself even once. And looking at the inside, you can see the boning channels ready for later. And of course, I whipped together the lining too. Before attaching the lining, I decided to get the boning ready. Once I cut the pieces, I started filing down the sharp edges. But I hated that, so I ended up taping them instead. Circling back round to the lining, it's a simple yet painfully fiddly case of pinning and machining the 2 sides and the top together. I did end up taking a chunk off at either end at this point because the bodice came out a little bit too big for me, which is probably a result of me not being very good at following seam allowances when actually assembling it. Before closing at the bottom, I inserted the boning that I prepared earlier into all of the channels. As you can already see, this gives the bodice so much structure and it starts to take a really nice shape. My final step of the day was to pin seam allowance along the bottom half of the bodice, ready to be hand sewn in the morning. Now we're on day 2. I need to finish sealing up the lining on my bodice because I didn't entirely finish that off yesterday. I hate attaching linings. They are way more fiddly than they should be, but it's fine. I very almost finished it. Once I finish that, I'm going to be putting all of the holes for all the eyelets in. I need to do that for the back and on the front. The front ones will purely be a decorative lace up and the back one will actually be the functional one. And then that will be the bodice fully complete. The skirt will be really quick, so I'm also going to do that today. That should not take me longer than like an hour and a half if I get particularly tripped up on neatly hemming it, because I'm also not great at hemming. Basically, I don't have a lot of skills when it comes to sewing. That's my plan for the day. I have no hopes at all that I will actually move on to the blouse today. That will be tomorrow. I think I should just stop talking and get on with it. Let's do it! I started the day off with over 2 hours of hand sewing the lining. Luckily, I had episodes of Sleepy Hollow to keep me company, but in all honesty, that probably just slowed me down even more because I got massively distracted by it. But once the stitching was done, I got to take my first crack at eyelets. So I've just spent the last 15 minutes playing with my new eyelet inserter thingy-majig. Sure it has an actual name, but that's the best I can do. I've done 4 practice ones in a little bit of offcut, and they're all terrible, like deeply terrible. But I think I know why. I think it's because I bought some very, very cheap eyelets and grommets, and that was a mistake. Essentially, the material is really cheap, so it just splits on the back, which means it's a little bit sharp. And I did think, should I just order some decent quality ones and just wait? But I'm kind of impatient. I might just do an extra thick modesty panel to protect me from the sharpness. So yeah, that's kind of my plan and what I'm thinking. So I think I'm just gonna run with it. So you can see they're not the neatest because they're cheap, but it worked, and they work even if they're a bit spiky. It'll do. I need to use something to lace the back up with. I was planning on using this, looks like I've got loads of it, but it's a little bit too thick for the holes and it's quite rough, so it doesn't pull through very nicely either, so basically it just doesn't work. And the only thing I've been able to find in a pinch that technically does work would be some Christmas twine from wrapping presents last year. So that will temporarily be what I'm using on the back until I actually buy something proper. So you will probably be seeing this in the final shoot. I've just put all the eyelets onto my bodice. Eyelets, grommets, whichever you want to call them. And now I'm going to be moving on to the skirt. I am basically going to do kind of like a mid-calf kind of length, and I think I'm going to go half circle, and I'm not going to do any gathers. But I think I'll do a waistband. Possibly button fastening. think I'll have like a button fastening with different adjustments on it, so you know, longevity. Cool, let's get started. Your basic circle skirt drill here. I had just enough fabric to get the length that I wanted, which turned out to be quite lucky. Also, please excuse the thread that I have apparently sat in at some point. Unlike with my last make, this skirt requires a waistband, so I figured a basic rectangle would do the trick. The skirt itself came together quite quickly. Like, I don't want to jinx myself here, but I think I might be actually getting the hang of this. One thing I will say though, when adding the waistband in, don't stitch it with the interior facing up on the machine like I am doing here, because my inside ended up looking flawless, but the outside looked really neat and rough, so definitely switch that around. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you know fastenings are not my forte. Because of this, I practiced my buttonhole on a scrap fabric beforehand, and I've got to say, I am pleasantly surprised with the results. I think it turned out pretty decent. As you can see, I went with 2 buttons so I can wear the skirt looser if I want to. And in light of that, I made a quick modesty panel to attach on the inside. So yesterday I finished off my skirt. My bodice is very nearly almost complete. Quick B-roll to show you yesterday's progress. And today I'm going to be moving on to the blouse. Too expressive, clearly. Now I'm really nervous about doing this. I've never made a blouse or any kind of shirt thing ever before, so that's completely new for me. Combined with, I'm going to be attempting to smock it. Attempting being a very key word in that sentence, because I've also never done smocking before. I've also not got any instructions, I've not watched any tutorials, I'm going to be completely winging this, purely based on a singular picture I have that shows the rough stitching pattern to create the design that I want. And I'm just going to be winging it from there, and we're just going to hope it all works out. So that's the plan, and we're just going to jump right into it. Now, I have a pretty weird method for making my patterns. I start with these 2 plastic sheets and use a whiteboard pen to trace the pattern that I want. I basically do this so I can reuse my pattern sheets and make them in any size. Once I have them traced, I lay them over the paper and use a pin to poke holes along the lines. And then once I have all the holes, I connect them like a dot to dot with a pencil and draw a new copy of the pattern. My method might be weird, but it works. Been pulling my hair out trying to figure out this smocking thing. I've done a little test sample on the fabric that I'll be using for the blouse. I measured it before I started to see the length of my little sample, and then I took another measurement after I'd smocked the pattern in that I want for the neckline. It went from being 3.5 inches long to 2 inches long, which means that for my blouse, all of the neckline area needs to be 1.5 times longer than what the pattern is so that it can be gathered in by the smocking and still fit me. I'm gonna put the pattern on the fabric and I'm just gonna kind of times the measurements of the neckline by 1.5. I'm just gonna kind of extend the panels and hope that all still works when it comes together. Yeah, I'm just gonna crack on with that because I've wasted a lot of time trying to mentally figure this out, and I think I've just got to do it and see where we get. So I have the front and back of my blouse here, and I'm just doing the collar. So I've got one piece pinned and one piece that I've actually sewn. And I swear, I almost don't want to smock it anymore because that is hands down the neatest sewing I have ever accomplished, and I kind of think it's beautiful. But unfortunately that's the back, and hopefully I can get the front to be just as beautiful. You know, I'm not too sure if this actually counts as smocking or decorative gathering, but at the end of the day, isn't that just what smocking is? When I started, I quickly realised I was doing too many stitches in one go because I couldn't pull it tight enough to get the shape. This was followed by pulling too hard and snapping the thread. Thankfully I managed to get into the rhythm of it. This process took a while, like probably half a season of Sleepy Hollow while, but boy was she worth it. As my first blouse, and therefore my first sleeve, and my first cuff, I naturally wanted to make it as complicated as I possibly could. My partner came up with this design for a petal-shaped cuff. I agreed to try it out on my current project to see if the design would work, because he didn't design it for this, it was for a Tolkien elven thing that he's doing. I did my best to make a mock-up from the concept sketch, and basically just hoped for the best the entire process. It took a lot of trial and error, but it got there. I've now assembled the majority of the blouse. It's got the sleeves and the cuffs on. It went pretty well overall. The one thing for me mainly is just that at the back there's just like this bit that kind of hangs really loose. I think I probably just needed to actually pull it in a bit tighter there, so I might go correct that at a later date. The other thing with the shirt as well is that I basically just attached the front and the back panel directly together. So I had these front side panels that I just didn't even use because there was just so much extra fabric from the fact I had to expand it to be able to do the pattern on the top. I did decide to just do a gather on the cuff instead of smocking them, mainly because I decided to do the uniquely shaped cuff, like the petal kind of shape. I thought smocking that as well might be too much, and if I change my mind I can always take the cuff off, smock it, put it back on. Very easy. And the only thing I have left to do is to just actually hem it, because that's still a raw edge. And then once it's hemmed, she will be finished. my foot. And that's everything. I'm just watching the battery flash at me on the camera and it's gonna die any second. And it's like, do I try and just finish or do I upset the battery? Oh, anxiety. Well, as you can see, I had a lot of fun running around a patch of green in the dress. I did have to lace up the back with Christmas twine and I completely forgot to put the modesty panels in. I wanted to do it before the shoot, but we were timing against rain, like it was going to rain any second, so I did not have time to put the modesty panels in before going out, so that was a later edition afterwards, which is why, again, you can see that those are not in the results. Other than that, I had a great time making this one. It came together so beautifully. Everything was just purely with stuff from my fabric stash. I made the entire thing with materials I already had in my studio, which obviously I do want to upgrade down the line. Like the lace up on the front, I want to do with an actual like decorative braided cord rather than the flat laces. And obviously I need to actually get some actual cord to do up the back, so I'm not just using Christmas twine. Other than that, absolutely had a blast. Loved making it, loved wearing it. Cannot wait to do an actual shoot now that my wig has actually arrived. And yeah, stay tuned and I hope to see you all in my next video. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button and I will see you next week.
And go. Very princessy.